Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this week's National Bleeding Disorders Foundation, formerly National Hemophilia Foundation, Wednesday webinar. My name is Fiona Robinson, and I'm the series host. In today's webinar, we will learn about the National Research Blueprint and how the public are invited to comment on it. We encourage you to ask any questions you may have today. You can ask them by using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen at any time during the webinar. We will monitor these questions, and following the speaker's presentation, I will put your questions to them. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to the community beginning on Friday, November 3rd. Today, we are joined by two members of the National Research Blueprint Steering Committee. Maria Santaella is the Vice President of Research Strategy at the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation, and Professor Dr. Michael Recht is the NBDF Chief Medical and Scientific Officer. I'd like to thank Mike and Maria for joining us today, and I will turn things over now to Maria to get us started.
Thank you so much, Fiona, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. So our job today is to show where we are with the National Research Blueprint and really launch our open comment period. We again want to hear from you. We want to know what you think, because all this commentary will be incorporated in the final version of the National Research Blueprint. Like Fiona said, I will be joined by Dr. Michael Recht, who's our Chief Medical and Scientific Officer at the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation. These are our disclosures. So the way we've structured today's webinar is that I will give you a bit of a background, a very general background of where we are today. But really, we want to emphasize a little bit more the section of really, we're at a point where we're thinking about how are we going to operationalize the National Research Blueprint based on community recommendations. We will discuss the open comment period and how you can access it, and then we'll leave some time at the end for questions and answers. So a little bit of the background. Before I begin, I would love to not only name them, but also thank our steering committee for their work on this. We've been meeting weekly for almost 3.5 years, 4 years, and their dedication has been really tremendous. We've been leaning on their expertise and on their leadership to accomplish this. So, of course, we have Dr. Len Valentino, who's our CEO and President of the National Bleeding Disorders. You already know about Mike and I. Sami Valadez is a leader in the community, and she's been a pleasure to work with. She's been a good guiding light for us. Dr. Carrie Norris is the Vice President of Health Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in the Bleeding Disorders Foundation. Samantha Carlson is a Senior Manager for Partners and Programs at in the Research Department at NBDF as well. And our two consultants, Drs. Donna DiMichele and Michelle Whitcup, who have been with us from the very beginning. Donna is a hematologist by training. She worked in NHLBI for many years and now serving as a consultant for us. And Dr. Michelle Whitcup is an advanced practice provider who worked in an HTC, was a vice president of National Hemophilia Foundation before she retired. So thank you to all of you guys. I would also be remiss of not mentioning the NRB working groups, the working groups that are currently finalizing this stage of the NRB. We begin with the lived experience experts, or LEE. These are community members, people either affected with bleeding disorders or family members of people who are affected by these disorders. And the co-chairs are Erin Sorelli, Ray Stanhope, and Sami Valadez. From there, we go to the far left with the research and development. That co-chair is Jill Johnson. Infrastructure is Siva Mann, Moses Miles, and Maggie Ragney. The workforce co-chairs are Dr. Lynn Malik and Amy Shapiro. We have community engagement, Dr. Shannon Carpenter, Jeremy Griffith, and Nathan Mermeloid. Our policy working group, Michelle Conte, Rich Basillo, and Nathan Schaefer. And last but certainly not least, the Health Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion working group. Co-chairs are Samantha Carlson and Carrie Norris. These individuals that I'm naming here represent the chairs, the leads of the working group, but understand that their work was was achieved by many others that that worked tirelessly with them to ensure that they accomplished their task. Before I go any further, I want to start by defining lived experience experts, because I already gave you a little tease in the previous slide, and I want to make sure that we're all using the same language. So lived experience experts are individuals, their caregivers, and family members directly impacted by inheritable bleeding disorders. Their diverse and personal knowledge gives them the unique ability to translate lived experiences into meaningful system change. Based on this important perspective, LEAs should, to the best of their abilities, influence and/or drive bleeding disorders research. They should reflect a diversity as vast as those affected by them. This is a definition that came directly from the LEE working group in an attempt the NBDF really wanted consumers or people affected by the disorder to participate in the NRB since the very beginning, but not just participate in a meaningful way. So in an effort to really balance out the power dynamics in these working groups, we thought, what title can we give them to recognize that unique perspective that they bring to the table? And for a while we were calling them subject matter experts, but without really unintentionally, we were placing them in situations where they had to really explain what were their subject matter expertise, how they had achieved it, because we were talking about that lived experience, and subject matter experts were used to hearing, subject matter experts are people who have experience and expertise and formal training in a particular subject. So they got together with the powers and the leniency that we've been giving them, and they came up with this term, and we have embraced it ever since, because it really truly represents that true lived experience, that unique perspective that they have that nobody else has. If you're interested in participating as an LEE in future research projects, this is the code, but of course you can always access it in our website. All right, so the meat of the program. So the National Research Blueprint is really a multi-year ambitious initiative to build and transform the research enterprise through fuel community engagement. That for us was very, very important, right? This is not an NBDF program. This is a community, a full community program. And what we set out to do at the very beginning was really look at a research approach, a research process, and a research outcomes, and really evaluate the way we're doing and think of ways that we could improve. So rethink how we prioritize research that really matters to those who are living with these disorders. Orient and democratize the research culture and structure to streamline and integrate these research efforts. And really ensure that research findings are really relevant and representative and inclusive. So as the NBDF, we convened the community and really coordinated the whole initiative from the get-go. We were leveraging all the advances in our community in recent years, and we then set out to coordinate the efforts and bring in the community together. So leaning into technologies, analytical tools, research interest and funding, community engagement, and bringing together lived experience experts, our LEAs, healthcare professionals, researchers, community leaders, and any other organization and government and industry partners in our space. Really, the goal was to develop a research blueprint that could markedly accelerate real progress that matters to patients and families, but really doing it soon. Believe it or not, we've been doing this since 2020, and it all started with the Blue Sky Vision focus group surveys, later on with the State of the Science working groups, RPGs, SOS, remote participation groups. Each one of these working groups was really bringing in the community. What does the community think we need? What are the most pressing needs? How do we bring the community together to achieve them? The SOS, the State of the Summit Research Summit, was in 2021, in the late summer of 2021, and really that was what we consider phase one, and I'll tell you a little bit more what that produced. We have continued working diligently throughout, but like I said, every step of the way thinking about how can we engage the community, how can we get input from them, even if they're not intimately working on the NRB on a day-to-day process. The SOS was summarized in publications that you see there, a QR code. Again, you can access those from our website. At the end of 2023, which is where we are now, again, opening for comment period. What is the community thinking about where this process is taking us as we now unveil what this is looking from us from the NRB process? So, like I said, we began phase 1 in 2020, and I like to say that phase 1, it was more about what were the needs of the community, what were those important gaps that we needed to address as a research community, and it really made me realize that really LEEs want to be part of the research process. They want to understand it more, and they want to participate. They want to be active members. Long are the days where they just want to be subjects in a clinical trial. They really want to engage at a different level. So the output for this phase was a list of prioritized research questions that were developed by the community. Again, they could be found on the manuscript in that QR code, and they were presented in the summer of 2021 to the wider audience. Those videos can also be found in our website. Phase 2 started around 2022, and this is the National Research Blueprint, right? The SOS presented to us the what do we need to focus in? What are the research questions that are important? The NRB is now looking at how do we make that happen? So the output of the NRB is a comprehensive plan that really integrates leads key members of the research team and really grounds research process in the HERI principles, 2 fundamental pillars that we use to build the NRB on. The findings of this initial NRB will be presented to the community again after this open comment period in January of 2024. Phase 3 has also started earlier this year, because now that we will have a plan, and that we know what research needs to be, how needs to be accomplished. We have this comprehensive plan that integrates LEEs and leans into health equity, diversity, and inclusion principles. We need to plan, right? We need to fundraise. How are we going to make this happen and really execute it? So with that, I hope I have provided you a good enough background of the NRB to date, and I'll pass it over to Dr. Recht, who will be giving us more details.
Thanks, Maria. I appreciate you giving that really wonderful overview of how we arrived at where we are today with the National Research Blueprint. And thanks to Fiona for coordinating this today's webinar. It's a real pleasure to talk to everybody. I'm going to now walk us through how we've begun to think about operationalizing all the hard work done by our working groups. One caveat before we move forward: because we want this webinar to pay specific attention to the work of the infrastructure, workforce, lived experience, expert, policy, and community engagement working groups, I'm not going to spend any time at all today discussing the work of the research and development working group for 2 reasons. First, the amount of work that has been done by the research and development group cannot be adequately summarized in the time we have available today if we want to talk about all the other issues. Second, by including the recommended research priorities in the talk today, I worried that things would get too complicated. So that's why I'm going to concentrate solely on the proposed infrastructure and how we aim to create a system allowing us to be successful moving forward. Could you go to the next slide, please? Before we think of the big picture, however, we need to understand what the vision of the NRB is and what the mission of the NRB is. Working with multiple members of the NRB Steering Committee, as well as with input from all of the working groups, we have attempted to create a simple yet comprehensive vision and mission statement. Remember, vision statements are a description of a desired future state of a company or a program. An effective vision inspires a team, demonstrates how success will look and feel. A mission statement, on the other hand, is a brief description of an organization's or a program's reason for existence. A mission statement succinctly communicates the purpose and the directions to all stakeholders. So, Knowing that background, let me read you all the vision statement for the NRB. Thriving in the face of an inheritable bleeding disorder begins with community-inspired research. I'm going to give everybody a second to let that sink in. Actually, let me read it one more time. Thriving in the face of an inheritable bleeding disorder begins with community-inspired research. In just 13 words, I think we have captured the immensity of what we are attempting to accomplish with the NRB. Create a state-of-the-art, multidisciplinary, cooperative research consortium centered around what is important for our lived experience experts and based and centered on the principles of health equity, diversity, inclusion. When I work with trainees or other collaborators, I'm always the guy who advises the team to think bigger. And we, the NRB, thought as big as possible when creating this statement. That said, we are all interested in your thoughts, which you will be able to share with us today, as well as through the public comment process. Our mission statement as well is our attempt to summarize our reason for being. I promise this will be the last slide I read directly. The National Research Blueprint serves to advance an accessible standard of care and quality of life for all who are affected by inheritable bleeding disorders. We will accomplish this through collaborative and meaningful scientific inquiry, coordinated through an efficient research infrastructure, undertaken by a diverse workforce in partnership with an engaged community, supported by clear and concise research policy, and grounded in the principles of health equity, diversity, inclusion. Importantly, the National Research Blueprint will be fully informed by lived experience experts who are key team members in research development, implementation, and dissemination. Next slide. Guiding principles are values setting a standard for behavior and attitude within a workplace or program. They are established to shape the culture of a work environment and ensure all stakeholders understand what behavior is expected. A couple of the specific working groups developed guiding principles to help influence how they developed their recommendation. The NRB Steering Committee then took these guiding principles from the individual working groups and created this draft in which we attempted to refine them to fit the entire NRB. After lots of revisions, here's where we currently stand with our guiding principles. Like I said, I'm not going to take the time to read through each principles, but I do want to call your attention to the fact that there are 3 overarching groupings: our research values, our authentic partnerships, and respectful communication. Under each one of these is the more granular principles. Please take the time to let us know your thoughts about our proposed guiding principles during the discussion period today, as well as through the public comment process. Next slide. Okay, now we're going to begin discussion of our first integrated draft of working group recommendations. These fancy slides were created by Kelly Holtz, so thank you very much, Kelly. I think they're really wonderful. She has created the slides in such a way that they flow from one important standard to the next. As you can see, we have elected to split the operating standards into 4 themes: governance, operation, research processes, and the integration of the Hetty and Lee voice. Next. Let's start by talking about governance. Governance is defined as a system of rules, practices, and processes by which a company or program is directed and controlled. Governance refers to the way in which programs are governed and to what purpose they exist. It identifies who has power and accountability, who makes decisions. In our proposal, the NRB will be a program of the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation Research Division, currently headed up by Maria, who I have the honor of working closely with. The NBDF Research Division will have oversight of the Office of the NRB. The Office of the NRB will be responsible for each of the activities in the lighter gray boxes. There will be an executive director of the NRB, as well as a steering committee, and those people will be responsible for every aspect of the NRB, including research and infrastructure and operations. Again, I'm not going to go through each of the boxes, but you can see we have hopefully created comprehensive rules of oversight to ensure that NRB is living up to our vision, mission, and guiding principles. The NBDF Research Division will also be supported by a scientific advisory board and a community advisory board. In broad terms, the scientific advisory board will help guide the NRB to ensure the absolute best science is taking place. The community advisory board will ensure the research being performed as part of the NRB is focused on our leads, as well as help prioritize the questions being asked. Okay, next. Operationally, the executive director and steering committee will be guided by dynamic governance. So you might ask, what exactly is dynamic governance? Well, we could have and probably will have an entire webinar discussing dynamic governance. But in a few words, dynamic governance is a fresh and creative way of working, creating a healthy culture of shared decision-making. It offers structures and processes for groups to use in organizations and seeks to create a safe and inclusive environment where everyone has a voice and no voice is ignored. Decisions are made by consent rather than consensus or majority voting. The approach is sometimes referred to as deeper democracy, as its focus is the creation of healthy power dynamics. Dynamic governance is still hierarchical, though less so than most typical organizations. Its structure is made of small teams. Each team has a well-defined description of what they oversee and have all the power and authority within this area to make decisions. Through dynamic governments, we propose the creation of both disorder-specific working groups, listed in the box on the left, as well as cross-cutting committees, listed on the box on the right. The purpose of the cross-cutting committees will be to ensure big thinking throughout. In the middle box, you can see the elements of our proposed clinical research consortium. Before I go into these elements, I want to assure everyone listening the NRB is not limited to clinical research. We fully expect to be able to participate in translational research, as well as eventually bench research, which might benefit from multi-institutional collaboration. At the outset, however, my hypothesis is the NRB infrastructure will be most suited for clinical research. This hub and spoke model will extend into the community and involve a central or designated institutional review board to ensure participant safety, centralized budget and contracting, a comprehensive website, and be the home for both data safety monitoring boards as well as observational study monitoring boards as appropriate for each study. Next slide, please. So let's drill down into proposed research processes. On the left of this slide, you will see the proposed steps a potential research project through the NRB will navigate. In addition, wherever you see the upside down blood drop, Lee and Hetty involvement are implied. We will start by soliciting research proposals to be evaluated by the appropriate condition-specific working group. Once a concept is approved, development of a protocol will commence. From there, protocols will be reviewed for budget, Hetty and Lee involvement, and IRB needs. Finally, once a study is active, information about that study will need to be disseminated. Our Lee research ambassadors will support awareness with the goal of optimizing recruitment and enrollment. One further aspect to call out on this slide is the demonstration of the important roles of the Lees in each step of the process. Next, please. Potential research proposals will originate from community prioritized research themes, like I said, that we won't be discussing today. These themes will be overseen by the condition-specific working groups I previously described, leading to the requests for research ideas. The working groups will invite the entire community to submit research concepts and resource requests. We all envision the potential for both multi-institutional and single institutional studies to arise from this process. Either of these types of studies will be able to be supported through the NRB. Next slide. Once a concept is accepted to move forward, the working groups will work with researchers and leads to optimally develop protocols, including potentially referrals to one of the cross-cutting committees, obtaining scientifically heady input into program development, and identification of potential collaborators. Once a protocol is finalized, it will be submitted to the Protocol Review Committee, which will include Lee's, although we forgot to put a Lee blood drop on this slide. Next slide. The role of the Protocol Review Committee will be to ensure Lee and heady input has been appropriately incorporated into all protocols, to review the resource needs and ensure the budget is appropriate, to determine whether a particular study needs to receive institutional review board assessment, to ensure the appropriate appointment of either a data safety monitoring board or observational study monitoring board as dictated by the protocol, and potentially to refer to a clinical research center. Next. Once activated, information about the study will be posted to the NRB website. The NRB will ensure the Lee Research Ambassador Program will be fully engaged to explain a protocol, promote recruitment, communicate study status, and participate in scientific and study dissemination. There will always be ongoing community and heady oversight with the ultimate goal of study publication and information dissemination. Next slide. Let's dig a little deeper into the meaningful impact of our lived experience experts and our heady champions. Within the NRB website, continuing education and outreach programs will operate to support Lee engagement as well as the Research Ambassador Program, the heady Oversight Program, and all other NRB resources. Next slide. This is probably the most important part of my presentation, as it attempts to summarize the important and innovative incorporation of the Lee voice throughout the entire research process, as well as demonstrate our promise to integrate heady principles in all we do. On the left are the working principles we have incorporated into the entire process. Again, I won't take time to read through these, but I hope you all believe we have fully captured our promise and our commitment to the entire community. Lived experience experts will be involved in every single step of the process, and heady principles will be embedded throughout the entire structure. For the lived experience expert, there are multiple opportunities to participate in the NRB, from being a primary investigator or a member of a study-specific steering committee, to being a member of one of the condition-specific working groups, being part of one of the cross-cutting communities, being a member of the protocol review committee, sitting on the central IRB, where you assess each study for participant safety, being part of one of the data safety monitoring committees, to being part of the clinical research consortium. And rest assured, anyone interested in participating will get the appropriate training and mentorship, ensuring successful participation. Next slide. So now I'd like to pass it back to Maria, who's going to walk you through the open comment period. We'll hold off on questions about the infrastructure until Maria has completed her section, and then we'll be open for all questions. So Maria, take it away.
Sure, and we only have a couple of slides to present, so all that period is coming soon. So the open comment period is going to open today, and we are expecting to close it mid-December before everybody goes into the holiday season. It is going to be in a form of an anonymous survey, and it should take about 15, if not less, minutes to complete. There's a lot of multiple choice answers, and there's always a place where you can expound on your answers. So please feel free to add to the comment box. So I'm saying it takes 10 to 15 minutes, but you can make it as comprehensive as you would like. We really, really, really are interested in your feedback. So it's an opportunity for us to present the NRB draft to the community. Some of those key slides that Dr. Recht just reviewed for us will be part of the survey, so that you can actually look at them and actually, give us feedback with information that you need to do that in a meaningful way. This webinar, like Fiona said at the beginning of the session, will be recorded and available as well. So if you need to relook at the slides and relook at the content, we also invite you to do that. Who are we targeting? Pretty much everyone, right? We want feedbacks from our researchers, from our healthcare providers, industry and government partners, but more importantly, from the LEEs. Do you see yourself reflected in this schema? And are you excited to participate? What would you need to be able to participate in it? And the goal really is to continue to integrate that community input into the final draft of the NRB to make it really a community comprehensive plan. The QR code on the top is going to lead you to the open comment survey, but we have social media planned. I know that Fiona has a link that she'll put in the chat whenever she's able to do so. So there'll be plenty of opportunity, and it'll be in our website, of course. So you'll always have a way of getting back to it. I do not want to end this webinar, but really thanking all of the members that really selflessly and have devoted hours, years, months, years to this endeavor. It was an ambitious from the beginning. It's been a long-term, multi-year endeavor, but we couldn't really do it without you, without each one of you. So I want to thank all the researchers, all the healthcare providers, industry and government partners, as well as the LEEs who have worked with NBDF to get us to where we are today. So thank you.
And I appreciate that, Maria. I just have one specific thank you to throw out there, and that, of course, to our fearless leader, Len Valentino, who started this whole process 4 years ago when he was first hired as the president and CEO of what was then the NHF. Without really his vision and his inspiration, we would have been nowhere with this project. So thank you so much, Len.
Agreed. Thank you. All right, and with that, again, this is the QR code for the open comment survey, which you will be able to access it many other ways. But with that, I'll open the Q&A portion of the webinar and see if anybody has anything they would like to ask.
Great. Thank you very much, Maria and Mike, for that really interesting presentation. We can see that a lot of work has been done by a lot of people in developing the National Research Blueprint, working from the output from the State of the Science Research Summit and bringing it forward towards operationalization. So congratulations to everybody for what's clearly been a huge amount of work. As you mentioned, I've dropped a couple of links into the chat while you were presenting. So I just want to mention to our audience that the first link that I popped in there is to an NBDF website with lots of resources and information about the blueprint, including a recent update report. And then Maria also mentioned the site where the public are invited to comment on the NRB. And so that's the second link that I dropped in there. And just maybe also I think we have some people on LinkedIn and on Facebook who maybe are not seeing the chat. Can you say anything, Maria, a little bit more about how else people can access that public comment opportunity if they're not seeing that link right now, or if they want to tell their friends about how to access it?
Yeah, we plan to engage our social media champions and NBDF, who will be posting these links and the QR codes in all those all those avenues. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. So feel free, you can be in the lookout for those posting who are coming soon. Our website is usually a good place to access those, so that will be there as well. Or you can look for my name in our NBDF website and contact me directly if you can't find it, and I'll be more than happy to send it your way.
Great.
And as I was saying to Fiona and Maria before we got on the call, I will use the last personal social media that I use. So you can go to my MySpace page or my AOL Messenger. Either one of those, you'll be able to get the link.
Thank you, Dr. Recht.
Yes, so we will now go ahead with our live Q&A. Just a reminder to our audience, if you have a question for our guest today, please pop it in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our best to answer all of your questions. Maybe I can start with a question that, well, I'm going to take moderator's prerogative and start with one of my questions. It's clear that the involvement of the lived experience experts is really critical here, and of the HEDI champions as well. So if somebody is living with the bleeding disorders, how do they know if they're expert enough to get involved in prioritizing research and developing research protocols? Because that could sound a little intimidating.
Maria, do you want to grab that, or do you want me to?
You can start. I'll
Okay, I'll take the first whack at it. And
Okay.
I think the importance of what we're developing is, in terms of lived experience expert participation, is twofold. The first is no experience is required. We will be designing educational opportunities. We will be having the ability to have mentorship for leads who are interested. So no experience required, point one. Point two, there are different ways for a lead to get involved. So if someone wants to be involved but doesn't feel that they want to be involved with research prioritization or designing studies, there are many different opportunities that are available. So that require differing amounts of background of how research is performed. So really the take home is anybody who's interested, we will help get people up to speed to have the skills required to participate at the level in which they feel comfortable.
I will add a little bit to that. That's a great answer, Mike. But I would like to add, from a personal experience, one of the things that I've enjoyed the most about having, been in this process since the beginning is really having engaged with the LEEs. Many of them came to us without any scientific or research experience, but they recognized the importance of research in their everyday lives. They recognized the importance of research in their children and generations to come, and so they wanted to make a difference. And like Mike said, it's a spectrum of engagement. You don't have to go all in, right? You can dip your toes a little bit, and as you feel more comfortable, grow within the process, or you can just simply stay and contribute what you feel most comfortable with. But part of what we're trying to entertain is that what do we need, or do you want to engage? Are you interested in that? And what do we need? What do we need to provide to you? What kind of tools, what kind of education, what kind of support do we need to give you so that you can do that in a way that makes you happy and makes you proud that you're contributing? I first learned firsthand with Esmeralda. Esmeralda Vasquez. She was the LEE chair and part of the steering committee for a while before she moved to other projects. Now Sammy's doing the same thing, but each one of the working group members, of the LEE working group members, have demonstrated that all you need is a little interest and be able to express your experience. What does it mean to wake up every day with the bleeding disorders? What are the challenges with treatments? What are the challenges of getting to an HTC if that's where the research is being conducted? Yes, I want to participate in research, but I have these issues that prevent me from doing that. The informed consent, can we make those informed consents a little bit simpler for us to understand? What about the findings? I never know what happens to these research protocols, and then when they're published in scientific language, in a language, in a language that I don't really fully understand. So there's so many little things that make a huge impact in the process of research. And like Mike said, you don't need experience in research, you don't need experience in the scientific process, but we need to know what you need so that we can get you there, so that you can contribute in a meaningful way.
Super, thank you very much. So if somebody is interested in getting involved, is it maybe the best place to go is to the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation's webpage? On the National Research Blueprint page, there is a form there to sign up for lived experience experts, right?
Correct.
That's correct. Yep.
So if you go to the research area of the NBDF website, there's a whole section about the NRB, and there's a whole subpage about the LDE involvement. And on the bottom, there's a button that, just simple information. How can we get a hold of you when we're ready for the next phase, and you can engage with us. And again, no commitment, right? This is all voluntary, where you're not signing up for something that you can back up from later. This is simply an opportunity for us to connect with people who are interested in carrying this project forward, and for us to start building the armies of LEEs that we will need to make this a success.
Super.
And then one further thought, this is 100% voluntary. No one is going to be forced to do this, but in all the grants that we're writing, we are writing to support the development of the NRB. We are writing in financial support for the LEEs who are might be willing to participate. So it has become very clear that in order to offer an equitable access to participation, we have to recognize that lived experience experts' time is worth something. And by worth something, I mean is financially worth something. So we are planning, if we get these grants successfully funded, to have some funding available for the LEEs who are volunteering their time, but there will be some associated financial support.
Great, thank you. Maybe, is there anything you would like to say about how the NBDF chapters could help with engagement in this process, both of lived experience experts and other members of the research community?
I can start. I mean, we love partnering with chapters, and there's always we're always looking to ways that we can collaborate in a way that makes sense both for the chapters and for us. I think that, like Mike said, in all the grants that, and perhaps I failed to mention that we are writing for grants. I mean, we recognize that this is not going to be, that we need funding to make this happen. And so we've already started thinking about where those sources of funding outside of our normal stream are, where they are government funding, foundation fundings. We are incorporating, you're right. So if we're working with the LEEs, we need to support them financially, perhaps, if we're asking them beyond the 1 hour here, 1 hour there. But we're also thinking about the chapters. How can they help us recruit? How can they help us educate the ambassador programs? How can they spread the word that this is something that many of their community members are engaged with them and not necessarily with NBDF? So how can we partner with them to make sure that their community members receive the same opportunities? Again, trying to be inclusive and trying to be representative. Research needs all the different voices, whether you live in a city or in an urban setting, whether regardless of your race and your ethnicity. The more representation that we have, the better. And I think that the chapters are really well positioned to helping us accomplish that.
Yeah, chapters are going to be key to the success of this program. Of all the great things that chapters do, one of the true strengths of chapters is they get stuff done. They're used to running programs. They have however many programs they have each year, and they get those programs done. And we really look forward to working with the chapters to develop educational programs for LEEs who might be interested, to help recruit people into participation in the various different levels, to help disseminate the results of what we find in these research studies.
Excellent. So perhaps I can ask about, we've had a question come in about how industry might be involved with this. Do you think, will industry work with the NBDF to incorporate LEEs into the process? Is that something that you foresee this infrastructure and endeavor fostering?
So I think industry, when we think about industry, we have to think about them at different levels. Initially, the National Research Blueprint infrastructure is not designed to run industry-specific sponsored trials. Whether we evolve into something like that, it would be great if we have that capacity. We are obviously very interested in collaborating with industry to gain from their experience, from all their years of multi-institutional collaborative research, to have their voice heard as we're designing studies, and certainly to ask for help in funding what we're trying to do. So I think those are sort of the different ways we're thinking about having industry involved at the beginning. As the infrastructure evolves, I think we will evolve in our thinking about teaming with industry as well.
So and an additional question that came in on this front was, do you envisage that someday all clinical trials would run through the National Research Blueprint, or is that not necessarily the ambition?
I think if we look at our vision statement, that would be a logical extension of that vision statement. Very aspirational, very, very aspirational, but a logical extension of our vision.
And I think I want to lean into a word that you say, Mike, that I think it's very important for our viewers to understand that this is a process that's evolving, right? It's been evolving since the very beginning, and it will continue to evolve as we think of ways of operationalizing it in a way that makes sense. But later on, as we start with those early pilot projects and when we start really conducting research within the umbrella of the NRB, we will learn, right? We will have learnings, whether they're wins or things that need improvement to make sure that it works. But it's in an iterative progress. So we're hoping that with community input all along the way, we'll start at a good place where we recognize that we need to evaluate the process constantly and tweak it and improve it so that at some point it'll become a well-oiled machine.
I think that's a really important point, Maria. And when we were envisioning this infrastructure, there are some examples out there that work really well, and that in the field that I'm most knowledgeable about is the cooperative research groups in cancer studies. And we know that, for example, at the beginning of my training as a pediatric hematologist oncologist, luckily I got out of oncology a long time ago, but at the beginning of that training, the cure rate for leukemia was somewhere around 50%, childhood leukemia. The cure rate for childhood leukemia now is over 95%. And the reason is, in the United States and in also many other countries, there is an organization called the Children's Oncology Group, which is sort of the prototype of what we're trying to develop. No matter where you live in the United States, no matter where you take your kid for treatment for their leukemia, that kid is going to be offered the exact same research study. And because of that collaboration and that centricity around the patient, we have seen massive gains in survival of all different kinds of cancers. And what we're trying to build here should mirror that kind of success. Now, the caveat is the Children's Oncology Group has existed for almost 50 years now. And they went through many fits and starts when they were launching. And there were some competing organizations which eventually merged. We want to learn from that experience, but we're not going to have a fully functional infrastructure when we roll out. One of the things we learned from Moses Miles at Athens was this idea of when you build software, you start out with your minimal viable product, the smallest thing that you can do that will work. And that's what we're going to build here. We're going to build the smallest infrastructure we can that will be able to support the types of projects we want to support initially, and then evolve into bigger and better.
So it's interesting that you mentioned Athens, and we have a question that's come in asking whether the NRB project and projects or data will differ from the data that's being collected through Athens.
Well, it will differ because we're going to be asking different questions. The whole goal of the NRB is not to reproduce any resources that already exist in our community. So, for example, Hemophilia and Thrombosis Research Society has wonderful mentorship program. We're not going to create another mentorship program. We'll work with HTRS. Partners in Bleeding Disorders has wonderful platform for education. We're not going to create a new educational platform. We will work as closely as possible with Athens to determine if Athens systems are the best systems that we can use to collect our data. I don't think we have any preconceived notions. As a former Athens employee, I'm going to admit my bias. I think Athens, if we can work it out, is the way to do it because we all know how to use Athens systems. But the actual questions we're going to be asking through the NRB are not the same questions that Athens is asking.
And I think maybe this next question does ask a little bit about the questions that you will be able to ask. We have an attendee who is asking, how will the NRB help research teams do the type of research that has been so far very difficult to do? And related, we've had a question about, are we looking really across bleeding disorders and this full spectrum of care? Is our vision that wide?
So I'm going to take the second question first, and then I'm going to pass the first question to Maria. So the second question, yes, our vision is broad and deep. Maria, go after the first question.
So, one of, and Mike mentioned Len, Dr. Valentino, at the beginning, when, at the beginning of his tenure in NBDF, back then NHF, he went around asking the community if resources were not a limit, right? If we had limitless time and resources, what should we focus on? What does the community need? And it was very clear that those with rare forms of bleeding disorders, not, putting aside hemophilia that today or in a few years went from having, recombinant standard half-life recombinant products and now are on the verge of gene therapy. There's still huge gaps in rare bleeding disorders and the ultra rare. So of course it's going to include them. Those were the questions that, so when we did, so backtrack a little bit. The SOS, the Len's effort to understand the community needs and where NBDF's role was to accomplish that started in 2020 with the Blue Sky Vision. The knowledge that came from those focus groups, that Blue Sky Vision project, really informed phase 1 of the NRB, which culminated in the SOS. Again, the papers that so skillfully Fiona helped us write, that are online, and you can find those in our website. And the whole summit is still recorded. And what that phase 1 did was bring the community together and figure out where were the gaps, what was the research that needed to be done to answer. What are the research questions to address those gaps, and what kind of research is going to help us accomplish that? So those priorities came from the community and through the SOS were defined by the community. Now in this NRB, and Mike said at the beginning that we really wanted to make it justice, and we will create another avenue to incorporate the incredible work that Jill Johnson did with the Research and Developing Working Group. They took those same the SOS priorities, and they put them they grouped them in ways that make sense. And those are going to be the ones that we will always strive to achieve, because those were research questions that we defined thinking about the future, thinking about 10 years from now, right? They're not research questions that are all going to be addressed immediately. But having said that, the community will see them again, the community will evaluate them again, and we will always take the community's guidance as to, as we approach the research going forward. All that to say, the community has told us since the beginning what the gaps are, helped us define those research questions, and now have been further distilled in a way that they're ready to go, basically, right? Ready to go. So as the NRB grows, we will be able to address them more at a time. We'll probably have to start with a few pilot projects just to test everything that we're building. But we hope that the community will continue to have input in what we decide and what we choose to study.
So what if I have an idea for research? Can I submit it to the NRB? Is there a way to kind of bring it in, or are the priorities already sort of all determined?
Mike, I'll let you finish my thought, but I think that, Mike had a slide there that talked about, the evaluation of protocols, make sure that they are in line with what the NRB it's set out to do, to include the LEE voice, to ensure that is representative and inclusive of everyone. And these topics are, even though they are honed in and they're research questions and research topics, they're vast enough that it's likely that that any interest from researchers outside of those who have been intimately involved with the NRB will be part of the scope of the NRB.
And maybe I should rephrase a little bit. What if I am a researcher that wants to get involved and has research that I'd love to bring to the NRB, and how do I get in, or how do I bring my ideas to the NRB and potentially participate?
Right. So that granularity hasn't been completely designed in yet. That will be, as we work through this minimal viable product, as we search for funding, that kind of granularity will be explained much more in depth. The one thing I will want to emphasize is anybody who's coming to us with a research idea and has a question, they sure better have LEE input before they come to us. If someone comes and says, I've got this great question and this is how I want to study it, and we don't see that LEEs were involved from the beginning, we're going to send it back and say, get some opinions. We'll help you get those opinions too. But before someone project is going to be considered, from the get-go, LEE involvement will be necessary.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. Well, that concludes the questions that we've received today. So thank you very much for answering those. I'd like to thank Maria Santaella and Dr. Michael Recht for sharing your time and your expertise and the work of so many people who have contributed to the National Research Blueprint with us this afternoon. I'd also like to thank each of you in our audience for joining us. This recorded webinar will be available on Friday, November 3rd at hemophilia.org under the Events tab. If you select past events, you will find all of our archived webinars there. Also available in the Events tab is the schedule of upcoming webinars in this series. Please join us next week as we look beyond the guidelines at challenging scenarios of diagnosing von Willebrand disease. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and have an excellent week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.